everyone. Today I'm going to be refuting Tyler's Jacinto's, is that it? Speech. So his claim was having a premarital agreement will make your divorce process easier. And his secondary claims were you will end up spending less money. That was number one. Number two is there is no confusion on who owns what. And then number three is premarital agreements are impenetrable. So I'm going to state my counterclaims right now so that way it doesn't get confusing later. So number one is I think that prematernal agreements is hard to afford, and just like divorce. And then number two is in order to know who owns what, the couple must come to an agreement that benefits not just you, but if you have children, it should benefit the child as well, or children. And then number three, nothing is impenetrable, not even premarital agreements. So in case anyone doesn't know what it means, well, you guys know what I mean. It's also known as a prenup, and it means that set forth what will happen to your and your spouse's assets and income in the unfortunate event of divorce, separation, or death. Most importantly, a prenuptial agreement can preserve the nature of property in the event of marriage ends. And this site this source I got it from the Legal Zoom. So I want to start off with responding to the first secondary claim, which is again that you will end up spending less money. I think it's the opposite, and because according to the website called Go Banking Rates, it states that California firms say that average prenups agreement is right cost between $2,000 and $6,000 per person, and some charge a set fee, many charge by the hour. So my Jacinto's first his evidence said that it was between $5,000 and $7,000. I know that mine says that it's less, but at the end of the day, what I'm trying to prove is that no one can just take out $2,000, $5,000 out of their pockets. It's impossible, and especially if you're not in a good, like financial condition, or if you're not stable, this is going to be a lot more difficult. So, especially like, for example, if you've been married for like 15 months or less, and then like you might have gotten a house, or you might have you're still paying the expenses of your wedding and stuff. So like, that just comes to like more bills, and then it just makes it, it makes you see that maybe a prenup isn't a good idea in the beginning. So, that's why I think that it would be a lot more money compared to what Tiger said before. So I'm going to go to my secondary counterclaim, which is in order to know who owns what, both of you must come to an agreement that benefits not just you, but as well as your child. A source that I found from Renee Yan, who writes for the Shorthorn, he stated that children are the ones most affected by this sudden uprooting of family dynamics. In order for a prenup to be an easy process, it's important to see if it is from all sides, not just the financial side of it, but as well as your child, if the couple has any, of course. Divorce is already difficult enough on a child. If you're adding a prenup, it makes it seem like the money is the only thing that you're trying to protect instead of your child. And so if the couple can avoid that type of agreements, or any legal action that can benefit their child, as well as their financial status, it can benefit both ways. if, you know, if they can come to an agreement beforehand without needing to go to the legal stuff. My third counterclaim is nothing is impenetrable, even prenup agreements. So Tyler stated that it's impenetrable. I think it isn't, because in his source, he said that prenups, well, premarital agreements it's rarely overturned. So he's kind of contradicting himself by saying that it's impenetrable, but it could be rarely overturned. So it conflicts itself. So it's a very strong claim to say that something is impenetrable when clearly you stated that if in order to be overturned, it needs, well, first you need lawyers to look extensively into the case, and then to see if anyone's going away with anything. If they don't go away with anything, or if it looks unfair, then it could be revoked, so on and so forth. So overall, those are my counterclaims, and thank you very much.
All right, Jasmine, I think that you've got a case of over-organizing here at the beginning. Let me tell you what their three claims are, then I'm going to tell you what my three claims are. Now let's go back to their first claim, and here's my counterclaim on each of those points. That's too much. All right, so just to remind us, here are their points. It would be less expensive, there's no questions about the property is, and he claims that they're impenetrable. I have responses to all those points. Let's go to the first point where he said it's less expensive. Let me tell you what my answer to that point is. It's not less expensive. He acknowledges that you're having to spend up to $6,000. My research, or up to $7,000. My research said it was between $2,000 and $6,000 in California. His said $5,000 to $7,000. One of the things you want to point out is, if you never get divorced, that's $7,000 that you just blew, you know. And if you're starting your marriage and you are, relatively young and don't have a lot of resources, spending $7,000 is a big chunk of change. You mentioned that, obviously, in your presentation. One of the things you might want to point out is that these things are only necessary for people who have established means or properties, where there might be some issue about that. So if somebody is marrying another person and that person has $1 million of assets, and they want to protect those millions of dollars of assets, then maybe a prenup makes perfect sense in a circumstance like that. But for most people, the idea that a prenup is going to solve their problems, it's going to in fact create problems. And by the way, what are the major reasons that people get divorced? Hey, guess what? Money. Money problems. And if you spent $7,000 that you didn't have in order to get this prenup, maybe that's going to create a situation that's a little bit problematic. I think there's a good argument to be made here. It just needs to be elaborated on a little bit and, honed, I think. You've got the right idea there. Like I said, in the context in which there's a good minimization argument also. Most people don't need a prenup, and if you're getting married young enough and you don't have resources, we already have rules that establish what the property rights are of people in those situations. They divide things equally, and that's the way it works. This only applies in limited circumstances, things that most people aren't going to be needing. And then your argument on the second point is that it has to be adjustable for both people. If a prenup gets challenged, almost automatically whatever savings you had goes out the window. Even if you lose, you've had to spend money for lawyers to challenge the prenup. Even if you win, you had to spend money to defend the prenup. So the idea that it's going to be less expensive assumes that the prenup is never going to be challenged, And obviously, if somebody feels that it was unfair and they were forced into signing a prenuptial, that's not what the situation is going to be. You think you've headed off a problem at the past when in fact you've created a problem for people in that situation. I did like the quote that you had there that talked about how the prenup makes it look like the children are the least important part of the thing and that the money is the most important part of the thing. I think there's a good argument to be made there. And again, I think that's one of those things that you want to talk about is what does it say when somebody demands a prenup before getting married about what your prospects of the marriage are. I'm entering into a marriage, but just in case it doesn't work out, I want to make sure that I don't get screwed in this deal. You're going, well, is that really the way you want to be going into a marriage? I think there's a good challenge to be made on that particular point. And then your last point, you basically are trying to take a play on the word rarely, which is a reasonable press to make. It would be nice if you had some examples. If you had the counter examples that show that this does in fact happen, that large amounts of money get spent fighting these issues, and that in fact occasionally people win. I have no doubt that courts have voided prenups because they were exploitive, not written correctly, somebody signed them under duress or something like that. All you need is a few examples of that, and you've got a better argument than the advocate had on that particular position. All right, thank you. Thank you all for